Hey guys, what's going on? So for those who don't know, GoatFormat.com's 47-person Worlds Tournament completed recently, and there's a lot that I could talk about. Like I could talk about how the Bolitos got second and fourth with Mimic Chaos, which is obviously noteworthy, as I previewed that on my channel about a month ago. I could talk about how Reclaire 91 got first place with a pretty standard-ish Thunder Dragon Chaos deck, but instead I actually want to talk about the third place deck, which is this really cool warrior deck. You know, I had no hand in creating this, but, you know, I figure you guys probably want to see some decks that, you know, aren't created by me for a change. And this is a very brave meta call. Very brave meta call. And I'll explain why. A lot of these choices are very interesting. I mean, this is a very innovative deck. So let's just sort of like jump right to the chase here. The reason why I love this deck is because of the monster lineup. In particular, I love 3 Mystic Swordsman level 2s. And let me sort of explain where this logic comes from. You know, I haven't spoken personally to the player, but it's very clear why he decided to play this card. So sort of like for a quick recap on like how we got to where we were, aggro decks in GOAT format always been popular to a certain extent. In the last year or so, Blade Knight was kind of like the key card that started to catch on. Like that was like what made Warriors good. The fact that it was light was very relevant. It allowed people to play Blade Knight like in a Chaos shell. So what happened is the other people, the control players, started to go, oh, okay, well, you know, this Blade Knight card is pretty good against us. We need to do something about this. We need to put a stop to this guy's shenanigans. So what happened is you saw Gravekeeper Spy get really popular in the main deck even. You know, both in like Chaos decks and Goat control decks. You definitely saw both those decks playing a decent amount of Gravekeeper Spy. Usually 2, but sometimes even 3, because, you know, I mean, Gravekeeper Spy just, like, kind of owns Blade Knight. Like, they attack into it, and you just get another one, and you're just like, darn, now they have 2 walls. And, even further than that, like, you saw a lot of, Chaos decks, particularly ones with a lot of discard traps, saying, well, you know what, I'm gonna play Mystic Tomato in addition to my Gravekeeper Spies. Because Mystic Tomato gets Sangan, which gets Sinister Serpent, and then Sinister Serpent can get discarded to my Raigeki Break over and over again. And then as a nice plus, Mystic Tomato is great at walling Blade Knight aggression. So that was kind of like where the meta was like going into this tournament. So this guy, SparkyFlary, who is definitely a very well-accomplished GOAT format player even before this tournament, been playing aggro for a long time. You know, he took sort of that back and forth, you know, that arms race between aggro and control. He took it to the next level and said, okay, if all the control decks are playing like Gravekeeper Spies and Mystic Tomatoes and, you know, sometimes even like Shining Angels or Dark Mimic level 3 or whatever, I'm gonna play Mystic Swordsman level 2, which just kills, you know, all of those, right? You know, we don't have to guess anymore, right? You know, with Blade Knight, you have to like have the read, right? Is the set like a Magician of Faith or is it Gravekeeper Spy? It's kind of like a 50-50. But with Mystic Swordsman level 2, not a 50-50 at all. You just kill it regardless. So, you know, some warrior decks might play like 1 Mystic Swordsman level 2. Usually they just play 0. He just went the full 3. You know, he went balls to the wall. You know, he understood the meta that he was going to be playing in, and he made a confident choice, right? He didn't try to like hedge his bets, go like, oh, I'll do a 2-2 split between Blade Knight and Mystic Swordsman. He's like, I know this is the right card for the meta. I'm going to max out on it. And that is the mentality that like you need to have if you want to succeed at the highest levels, right? Like you can't play scared. You gotta like know what you're getting yourself into, and you have to like unapologetically exploit the meta. And that's exactly what he did, and I love it. So some of his other choices are like, you know, pretty standard, right? You know, you got like, you know, your toolbox here, your double Blade Knight, your Warrior Lady, your Don Zalug, your Exiled Force. So that's like a lot of rota targets, right? That's actually a total of 8. So no shortage of rota targets. I do want to point out he didn't play Ninja Grandmaster Suzuki in the main of the side, which I actually kind of agree with. I think this is another situation where he kind of bucked the trend and it paid off for him because, realize he's competing at the highest level of competition here. Players aren't stupid. They're not going to special summon their Chaos Sorcerer in defense and let you kill it for free with Ninja Grandmaster, right? It's just not going to happen. Really, the only thing that Ninja Grandmaster would do against the average deck would be to kill face-up Gravekeeper Spies. But that's like if they're already face-up. He's saying, well, they're never going to be face-up, because as soon as they get set, I'm going to kill them with Mystic Swordsman. Or, Nobleman Crossout, right? So, again, he didn't try to hedge his bets. Like, he had a plan and he stuck to it. And clearly it paid off for him. Also, kind of noteworthy spot in the monster lineup is 2 Kaikus. I like this choice. I think 2's the right number. It's not searchable. It's not a warrior. But it's a pretty solid card right now. Again, he knew the meta that he was getting himself into. He knew there'd be a lot of chaos decks. And Kaiku is obviously quite good against them, especially when you're on an aggro deck yourself. I don't really like Kaiku like mained for like a chaos control mirror, but I do like it with aggro against control. Because, even with these decks, what'll happen sometimes, I know this from being on both sides of the matchup, is if you're like attacking with like Blade Knight and Mystic Swordsman, they'll like set Sinister Serpent to just wall your attacks for a while. But obviously, like, you can summon Kaiku and then just banish their Sinister. It happens more than you think. I think this is like the kind of deck where you'll banish Sinister more than you think you will. And obviously, just like banishing a couple of Thunder Dragons is absolutely huge, because a lot of Chaos decks, I mean, I know this, I'm mostly a Chaos player myself, they're pretty greedy on their light count. They really can't afford to have like 2 Thunder Dragons banished. So yeah, Monster's pretty standard. Tribe, not necessarily a card that all aggro decks main, but I think it's pretty good here too. Wanted to have it just in case like Scapegoat would come up. You got some good discard targets. You can discard extra copies of level 2. You can discard extra copies of Dust Shoot. So that's fine as well. And, spells not super noteworthy. But again, I want to talk about like how he really stuck to his guns with the Mystic Swordsman plan by playing 3 Book of Moons. There's not really a lot of your own guys you're going to want to book in this deck, right? Like, you can book your own DD Warrior Lady, I guess. You can maybe book, like, a random guy to, like, save it from Snatch Steal or something. But the main reason that you're playing this card is, obviously it counters, like, Thousand Eyes Restrict, but also it does have some good synergy with Mystic Swordsman. So if they've got whatever it may be, a Chaos Sorcerer or whatever, you can just book their guy, summon Mystic Swordsman, run it over. Not necessarily like what you're like looking to be doing. Obviously, you'd hope that a Chaos Sorcerer never gets summoned at all. But this deck doesn't have a lot of like strong dudes, right? Like other than like a couple of Blade Knights. So like if there's just a random monster in play, sometimes you just need that to run it over, Traps are also pretty interesting. One of the things that I want to talk about in this deck is the 2 Dust Shoots and how this makes this deck like a good going first deck and a good going second deck. So like obviously Dust Shoot is much, much better when you're going first. If you draw it late, like I said, you can potentially discard it to like Tribe or Graceful Charity. So you've got like some good options going first. Like you're normally not going to summon a monster going first in this deck. You're just going to like maybe set a Saku and a Dust Shoot if you have it and say go. And then obviously the fact that we're playing 3 Mystic Swordsman level 2s also makes this deck great going second, because like most people will like set a monster turn 1 and then you just run it over, which is pretty good. Another interesting thing about this deck that shapes some of the other choices is how few monsters it plays. It only plays 12, and when you consider the fact that like Exiled like is barely even a monster, and like Mystic Swordsman only has 900 attack, this is like not a lot of monsters. Like not a lot at all. So I think that's part of the reason why he decided to go with the 2 Compulse to save his monsters from removal. He kind of needs that because he doesn't have very many. And sort of the same reasoning for the Premature. It's like you don't have very many monsters, so like, you kind of need that to make sure you don't just like randomly run out of threats. And also like the fact that you play very few monsters makes Torrential a lot better in this deck than it would be normally. Some aggro decks you can't really play Torrential, it kind of depends. Here, I think it's pretty good because you're not always going to have monsters in play, so there'll be plenty of times where you can get value from Torrential. I don't want to talk about the side deck too much. Some of these choices I don't like very much. Like, in particular, I don't like Threatening Roar. Because I think against, like, Reasoning Gate, even if you Threatening Roar them, they can beat you just by summoning a bunch of monsters, and you won't have a lot of ways to kill them all. So I don't like Threatening Roar. I do like the double Azura BLS, though, in particular. I mean, that's not, like, super standard. You almost have enough lights and darks to just play BLS in the main, but we're short on lights. That's where the Azuras come in. Like, against Goat Control, you just bring in, like, the 2 Azuras, because you want to be able to deal with Scapegoats, and then you bring in the BLS as well. So I like that. That's a good plan against Goat Control. I think game 1, we're probably favored against Goat Control by a little, but I think in game 2 we can be like even more favored. And you know, post board, I think like a lot of control decks just won't really have ways to deal with this, because like Goat Control's main plan, like their main side decking plan, is just bring in like just more walls. Like they're remaining like 2 spies, and they'll side in like whatever it might be, like legendary Jujutsu Master or whatever. So like you got like the Mystic Swordsman to just kill that, and then you got the Azure to get through the goats. So I think like this deck could do pretty well against the average Goat Control deck right now. You know, regardless of what build it may be, they're kind of different builds of Goat Control, but I think this deck would do pretty well against all of them. Yeah, I mean, that's about it. I also kind of like Mind Crush as a side card. It's not like super out there. That's something you kind of see a lot, but you know, combos of Dust Shoot. It's good against like Thunder Dragon Chaos. It's good against combo decks. I kind of like that too. The only thing like I feel strongly about adding is I kind of like Chiron the Mage maybe over the 3rd Mobius, because you're playing so many spells that, you know, I think against like certain decks where you know they're bringing in Decree, like yes, Mobius can kill Decree, but like you have to have a tribute for it, which like I said, given how few monsters we play, not always guaranteed. So I kind of think I just like Chiron more. Like Mobius is kind of higher risk, higher reward. You know, like Mobius can definitely be a blowout, but like if the only thing that I'm worried about is just beating Decree, like I don't need my answer to Decree to be a blowout. I just need it to be like a solid card that's not going to be dead very much. So just something to think about. Like I said though, I like this deck. It's beautifully constructed. I think, you know, I think with a lot of these tournaments, like people kind of take the wrong mentality, which is like, oh, I know the tournament's going to be hard, so I want to like play something safe. But to me, I think you kind of have to like look at it the opposite, which is like, I know the tournament's going to be very hard, so like I need to play something that people won't see coming and exploits the meta. That's kind of like the mentality that I try to take. And you'll see that when I talk about the decks that I built. And that's why I decided to talk about this deck, because I think, you know, this player made a brilliant choice. I think he has a good mentality, and I know SparkyFlary like doesn't necessarily play a ton of GOAT format, but like I have the feeling that as long as he does, he'll keep doing well. You know, aggro, you know, like a lot of decks like Chaos has a lot of tools, but like so does aggro, right? Like you got all these different like anti-meta choices you can play, right? You got your Kaikus, you got your Blade Knights, you got your Mystic Swordsman level 2s, you got your King Tiger Wangus, your Zura Priest. Like it's just figuring out like what collection of those threats is like the like optimal choice of threats for the expected meta. And here I think he definitely showed up with the right combination of threats. Might not necessarily be the best combination going forward, depending on how people adjust, but I think it was a very good choice at the time. And like I said, you know, you shouldn't necessarily copy this deck, but you should definitely copy the sort of like underlying logic that went into choosing this deck. So that's why I want to talk about this deck. Let me know what you guys think, and thanks for watching.